A blessed day to each and every one of you. What a wonderful joy and privilege it is to bring the thought for the day from the Word of God that has the life and the power and the capacity to help us live out the purpose of God for the glory of God through the comfort, the change, the conviction it brings on the inside out, so we can become more and more like Jesus and live out His purpose for the honor and the glory of His name. Last time when we joined together, I shared with you how the fear of God gives us victory and freedom over the fear of disease, over the fear of death and danger. And how while the fear of disease and death and danger paralyzes us, the fear of God powers our faith and it fuels our faith to live for Him no matter what we are faced and surrounded with. In fact, the fear of God does not exempt us from suffering or situations or sickness, because what we find happened next was that the king was, angry of the response of these three young men, Abednego, Shadrach and Meshach. They said in chapter 3 verse 17 that we read last time, the God whom we serve is able and He will deliver us. But even if He does not, we will not bow down, O King. I love their faith. You know why? Because their faith was not founded and grounded on the answer to any prayer request, on the answer to their heart's desires, or on the answer on them having deliverance or not. It was founded on the faithfulness, the righteousness, and the mighty power of the God whom they serve and worship, that you and I worship and serve today. The king became very indignant and furious and commanded the flames of the fiery furnace be increased 7 times more, and he ordered his men to bind them from head to feet and throw them into the fire. And what happened was this: because of the urgency of the king's command, while the soldiers were taking these 3 young men to be thrown into the fiery furnace, the heat of the flames was so great that it consumed them and killed them, and these 3 young men were thrown into the fiery furnace. And here's what it says in Daniel 3:24-25, the thought I want to leave with you today. It says in Daniel 3:24, then the king Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said to the king, true, O king. Look, he answered, I see 4 men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. You see, the fear of God did not exempt them from being thrown into the fiery furnace, but on the contrary, the fear of God brought about an amazing assurance and a revelation that God is present. His presence is present with you in the midst of the pressure, the pain, and the problems that you can go through. And that's the thought for the day, that God's presence is present with us in the midst of everything. We need to understand, when you are for God and you are with God, God is for you and God is with you. And there are 4 things that the presence of God brought about in their life. Number 1, it brought about shelter. It brought about protection. In verse 25, it tells us how they were not hurt. While the king's men, even before they fell into the furnace, was consumed and killed, yet these 3 young men were sheltered from the fiery furnace. And what a wonderful promise of God's presence that we have is shelter. The second thing, it gives us strength. You see, God's presence gives us strength to be in the midst of the fiery furnace and to endure whatever you have to go through and whatever we are going through. The presence of God not only shelters us, the presence that is present with us also strengthens us, and thirdly, it sets us free. There's a setting free, because they were put bound, but in the fiery furnace we are told how they were loosened. I want you to know the presence of God that is present even in this time has the ability to set us free and unbind us and loosen us from things that we need freedom in our own lives. And fourthly and finally, one of the most powerful things the present presence of God does is this: it shows forth who Jesus is. Because in the fiery furnace, Jesus was present. The 4th man was none other than the Son of God, Jesus Christ, the pre-incarnate Christ in the Old Testament. And King Nebuchadnezzar had a revelation of who Jesus is. I want you to know, God is present. God's presence is present with each and every one of us, even in this crisis. And He wants to refine us, and He wants to reveal Himself to others through our situation. And I pray that we would let God do that. May God bless each and every one of you. God